DDG episode 94. My name is Dave Hunt, and I'm joined by Michael Swick.
How is it going, Dave? How's it going? This is my generic, non-intro since I don't have a catchphrase. How's it going, Dave, is my catchphrase.
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. A little overworked, a little sleepy, but I got to play a lot of video games this weekend, so that was nice.
Yeah, mine was kind of the opposite. I didn't have internet for like 4 days, so because of the storms that came through, and it also made work interesting. So like Wednesday afternoon, we had like 80-mile-an-hour winds come through the area, knocked out power to the people across the street from us. That side of the grid. Apparently, the grid goes right down my block. So a lot of people, tons of people without power in the Metro Detroit area, including my store that was working overnights or partial power. So that always made it interesting. But I guess I'd rather have electricity and not internet than not both. So,
yeah, you need one to keep yourself entertained at least.
Yeah, but we can't watch any TV. So
it's true.
But we survived, and it's all good. We're like down to like a family of 3 instead of a family of 5 now. All the older kids are gone off to college, so that's kind of been the last week or so. But how are things with you?
Things are fine. Just working way too much, but luckily I had a couple days off because it was Sarah's birthday on Saturday, so just was able to get 4 days off in a row to try and relax. But I don't know about you, but it's 4 days off in a row, but the day before you have to go back to work is just a day of dread. So that's today, which is a great time to be recording. But all I think about is crap, I got to go back to work tomorrow and deal with more bullshit. So it's 3 good days off and then 1 day of dread is what I'm dealing with right about now. But yeah, everything's fine outside of that.
Yeah. So I didn't know that your girlfriend and Owen shared a birthday.
I feel like we've discovered this accidentally,
Twice.
Every time.
And then we just forget.
Yeah, every
forget
time.
later.
And then Sarah makes a post, and then Angela makes a post for Owen, and it's oh yeah, they're the same birthday. Yeah.
There's 3 people I know that are born on the 14th, so that's awesome. So all right,
Sarah, Owen, Kofi Kingston. Those are the 3, right?
Well, I mean, a very good friend of mine that I went to high school with. And stuff
you went to high school with Kofi Kingston?
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Okay.
All right, so we are Digital Days Gaming. We are a weekly podcast that has done now 94 consecutive episodes, which is kind of crazy to think about. But we post every Thursday morning, 6 a.m. Eastern Time on podcast services of your choice. You can listen, and if you leave a review, you can listen and watch live on Twitch, twitch.tv/digitaldaysgaming, where we are an affiliate, so you can leave a subscription if you have Twitch Prime, or if you choose to support us financially that way through Twitch subs. That's also appreciative as well. Other than that, there's a bunch of stuff in the show notes that you can click on and check out, or just hit the website, digitaldaysgaming.com. And I'm going to throw it over to Michael. We got a really heavy-hitting news week this week, super heavy-hitting in the middle of August. So,
yeah. And Dave is obviously joking because we're 2 weeks away from Gamescom, so we'll probably have actual news to talk about. But this is more of a follow-up to last week. Kotaku has confirmed with their sources, and I believe 1 or 2 other websites also confirmed this. The remasters that Take-Two are working on are GTA Trilogy remasters. They keep referring to them as a trilogy, but all 3 games are pretty separate from each other. It's more like an anthology, if anything, but that's just me being nitpicky. GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas are apparently being remastered. And the thing that I find almost hard to believe is apparently they're scheduled to release this fall. And they're coming to everything, including the Switch. Yes, Rockstar is one of those companies. They can totally release a Grand Theft Auto anything with little to no pre-order ramp up and hype and promotion, but they are releasing GTA 5 on PS5 and Series X this year, so I would imagine they wouldn't want to throw too much. But
I don't think this would affect it at all. I think that if you're a GTA fan, you're just getting all of it. What's it going to be, $100 total?
Yeah, I'm
for
guessing
4 games. I'm talking about if you buy GTA 5 on PS5. Let's say that's $50-$60, right? I mean, at this point in time. And then the trilogies. What I'm actually the most surprised about, and I don't know if you have it in here or not, but it sounds like they're going to be bundled into one game, which doesn't.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about it last week, and I was like, they could just release each of in theory, with the GTA fans, they could release each of these games independently as a remaster, and probably charge $40 for each of them, and they would chart. Like they would be in the top 10 for whatever month they came out with. I almost feel like no matter when they came out.
No, for sure. And it sounds like what might help this actually come to fruition is it sounds like they're looking at like potentially a digital only release, at least at first, which makes it make even more sense for them. And these aren't just like going to be the mobile ports that we've seen on PS4 and Xbox. Because I think even on the Xbox, you end up with like the mobile ports unless you use the backwards compatibility discs. But I think that's only San Andreas that's available on the Xbox right now. So this is they're being remade in the Unreal Engine, and they're going to blend new and old graphics with like an updated UI. But they're trying to make them feel as much like the originals as possible, which is something we talked about last week on like how much you can actually change. And it sounds like we're getting what is being described as modified versions of the originals. So like if someone ran mods on like the PC versions of these games, which I think is fine with me, to be completely honest. Like I don't want a full from the ground up realistic like remake of these. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think I mentioned before, like I'm not a big GTA guy, but I mean, obviously they're a juggernaut in the industry in terms of the franchise, and I think that this leads more into what we had talked about before, where it's obvious that like these aren't getting very much work to them if they can come out in the window that you're saying that they're going to come out in, and we hadn't heard about it yet until now, and if they also are going to be tripled up or bundled up like that, then there's probably not as much polish and rebuilding as doing like hopefully they tweak some of the controls a little bit, and like maybe change some stuff that was built like you had mentioned, like thankfully it's not a mobile port, so the controls should be a little bit more intuitive, but that's fine. I think that this is them probably seeing like how this sells and then deciding if it's financially worth them doing a complete remaster or rebuild for something. It also leads me to believe that 6 is much farther off than we believe, like much farther off.
Like further off than like the way far off stuff we've been hearing, because we've been hearing like 2026 for GTA 6 is like the earliest date I've seen. But yeah, no, it makes sense. Like this will buy them time, and the reason it sounds like it's done, it sounds like so Rockstar Dundee, I believe is what they're called now, formerly known as Ruffian Studios. They've been working on this game for a while. Ruffian Studios helped with Crackdown 3, and then they helped the Master Chief Collection. So they know a thing or two about remasters, and since this one isn't a full from the ground up remake, that's why we're getting the leaks already, because if it's close to production, that's when you usually, or close to the final stages of development, that's when leaks do happen. So I'm wondering if we're going to see something like at a Gamescom, because you don't do like a big reveal for this. This is something that you just kind of throw in like a Gamescom.
Plus, Rockstar just doesn't care.
Rockstar doesn't care. Like if they
not that they don't care,
event,
they just do their thing. Like they'll release a screenshot. Like I still remember for some reason like GTA 5 hype, like of them releasing a screenshot with like an 8-day counter, and they can whatever, whenever GTA came out like 10 years ago, GTA 5 came out like whatever 10 years ago, now 7 years ago. But they controlled the internet for like those 8 days. Like
they single screenshot being like, come in next Thursday for this, and it just destroyed the internet.
They don't show up at at E3. They don't go on Sony stage. They don't go on Microsoft stage. They don't go to E3. Or if they've ever been at E3, it's been like super behind doors, like upstairs meeting rooms, like probably in hotels that I haven't even heard of people covering it. I don't remember. It's been so long since their like their new game came out, but they don't what do you call it, they don't
they play by their own rules.
There's no early access, there's no impressions, there's no nothing like that. So
they used to actually do media events back in like the San Andreas days, but they haven't had to do that. I want to say the last time I heard them doing an event was maybe Red Dead 1, and then after that they just do their own thing. But I'm looking forward to this. I've been actually considering going back to these, even though I would have to play on PlayStation, which I believe, again, those are mobile ports. They're actually really good ports, but they're missing tons of music, and there's just like some weird jankiness with them.
I could see you totally playing this on the Switch, though. Like
that, I know when I heard that it was like Switch, I can deal with. It's funny, like when I play something
it's a 12-year-old game. It'll run on the Switch fine.
No, exactly. But that's one of those things where like I'll take the mobile port on the Switch because I can deal with jankiness on the Switch screen. But like when I'm on like my PS5 or my Series X, I want like a full blown like port remaster. But on the Switch, I can take and deal with some jankiness.
But I could totally see you like sitting on the couch. Sarah's playing 15 or 14 or whatever she's playing, and you're just playing GTA, and like you guys just.
Yeah, just me just doing turf wars in San Andreas, which is like the most addicting thing to do in that game back in the day.
Right. I mean, this is cool. I mean, this is kind of, we talked about this last week on their they came out of their earnings call where they were, like we went kind of down the list of franchises that they could, like I think that you would refer to them as like a remaster or a re-release essentially.
Yeah.
And like they were talking about they had more games coming this year or this fiscal year at least, and like this obviously is the biggest surprise out of this is that they're not splitting them up. So
yeah, like if they actually, I can see them doing a collection and then just releasing them separately anyways, but not charging full price for them. Obviously, if if they put them in a $60 bundle, all three, they can't do them separate releases at $40 each.
Oh, they can.
They can, but they won't. They're not Nintendo. Right. They won't.
There'll have to be some incentive to buy all three of them though. So I could see them being $25 or $30 a piece.
I could see them being like, hey, if you buy this game, you'll unlock skins for GTA Online account or something. There'll be some connection to GTA Online with these. Oh yeah, for sure. Whether it's just like, hey, if you own it, here's some skins or some cars. Or
they use this to launch their Take-Two GTA accounts, and you can earn credit in these remasters that you can spend in GTA Online, because it's not even really called GTA 5 Online anymore. It's just GTA Online, GTA right?
Online, yeah, and I think that's very telling for like what's going to happen with Grand Theft Auto over the next couple of years.
For sure.
I still know people really want Bully, because now that they announced these 3 of the 6, but like, I
think you're right though. Like the politically correct world of video games that we live in right now. I just don't know if they could do it. Like out of any company, like a Rockstar, like wouldn't care. Like in terms of they would just release it and let the consumer decide. I feel like out of any company, Rockstar's that way. And just say, hey, like if people didn't like it, then they shouldn't have bought 9 million copies of it or whatever it would or wouldn't sell.
Like, but I also see them kind of having the thing where how we hear like PlayStation is like, oh, we only want to make prestige games.
Yeah.
Rockstar's hit that point to where it's like, do they want to get whatever backlash Bully would get?
I agree.
In terms
which is why I think 6 is way far off, because like they're setting their own bar higher than they're supposed to set it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wonder like if like some of these people, like who knows if we ever hear about it in a couple of years, they're like, we were going to do this in GTA 6, but the bosses said it wasn't enough, like in terms of like the stuff that like at this point in time. And again, I haven't delved deep into the GTA world, but I almost feel like they need to go off-world with this at this point in time, underground or in space. They kind of messed with that a little bit with UFOs and stuff like that in 5. Like, I don't know if they can just, make GTA 6 and have it be in, Miami or New York.
Well, I think they would have to go retro, or they would have to go overseas.
Okay.
Like, they can't just give us a U.S.
A New York or an L.A. or a Miami anymore, so...
Yeah, or unless you give us retro, like if you give us like a Vice City, Miami in the 80s, then that's fine. But I don't think they can do like, oh, here's modern day New York. It's just like, okay, cool, that's whatever. They would have to take a risk like that, but then they run into the issues of like, okay, how will this interfere with GTA Online? And they have to work against that. And to what I was saying about Bully, they lost all the big leads at Rockstar, so now you have even more of a corporatization there, where they're not going to want to deal with the backlash for Bully. They're not going to want to deal with the backlash for Manhunt. I think the safest bet
is... founders of Rockstar are at least half of them are gone now, right? Like he left and starting his own studio, and there's only one guy, and then there's I know he's running it, but I'm sure that there's financial pressure for like I can't imagine the chart that's in Rockstar's offices of expectations for 6, like and like where it has to be at, because again, there's a bar. And like, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, they you know, like they have a goal of hitting like somewhere between an 8 and a 9 possibly, and then they try to do stuff that's an 11. So the expectation would be like 6 would be like a 13, you know, in terms of like stuff you could do. And I think that they're, you know, hopefully 2026 is a safe point for them not to release it on prior gen consoles, but who knows with that anymore.
Yeah, there's probably like they have a bar graph. Or they have, like, a graph that's constantly going up that once it hits a line, they're like, all right, we're next-gen only. Like, we've hit the numbers.
They're trying to figure out, like, when is that going to be, like, socially acceptable? Like,
at 25 million PS5 sold or 50 million PS5 sold. That is going to determine how far their tech goes, which will just delay the game in general. Yeah, I really think Warriors is probably, like, the safest bet for, like, the next Grand Theft or the next Rockstar remake. Just because it's a beloved movie franchise, but we at least now have 3 of these knocked out for the 6 that they like announced. It's kind of hilarious though. We're at this point now where video gamers pay so much attention to financial reports, us included, that this is where we get our game announcements from, which is just funny thinking back. Like, this information has always technically been available through financial calls for the last, like, 30 years for video game franchises, but no one's ever really gone to them as often as we do now, because that info you
almost feel like that the earnings call came out, and then the websites are, like, looking, you know, for work for their writers or content creators or whatever, and saying, okay, let's start investigating or looking into and reaching out to sources about what we heard from this earnings call. And then the earnings call is like, you know, kind of public information. So now that some public information's out, maybe the other people can kind of like, you know, hint around things. Their sources can hint around stuff. So then all of a sudden, oh yeah, it's probably gonna, you know, it might be this one and this one and this one bundled together, and then all of a sudden, like, we've got a new story. So
exactly,
whether it's Kotaku, whomever it is, yeah. You say what?
I keep saying exactly for some reason today. I don't know why. It's just a tired brain. But no, that's what probably happened in this scenario. Is like the financial call comes out, gives a little bit of a breadcrumb trail. Reporters then ask like all the Rockstar studios, like, okay, we have an idea of what you're working on, and they just start bouncing ideas off them, and then someone eventually cracks. Or someone that feels confident enough, like, well, the news is half out there. Let me just
Or they ask the same question to 10 different people, and they take all 10 answers and formulate one response out of it. Like,
which is how we also probably end up with the thing where all the places are like, oh, it's coming out this fall, which could be completely wrong. Right. But that's where you end up with these, like, you know, like little false, like bullet points that come out of this stuff, is because they like source it as much as they can. And would an art designer know the release date of it? Probably not, but they might have an idea, but you just go
based on their schedule. They might know, like, hey, you have to have this done but it's also like bringing it up at holidays. I think in the holiday season is a high priority, because we always talked about, like, you know, grandma going in the store and buying Spider-Man or buying Madden for their grandkids or whatever. Like, people are like our age, or, you know, like a lot of our listeners are you know, similar age to us in the 30s, I would say, that this is something that their significant other would walk in and be like, oh, I remember him playing this game, you know, 10 years ago for hours on end. Like, I'm getting this for him for Christmas. You know, and if he or she sees it on the shelf and like is trying to figure out a, you know, I guess, you know, to be honest with you, an easy $50 gift that their, you know, their significant other, you know, may or may not play, but it's still be like, oh, I had a great time. It's like that opening of the gift that everybody wants. Like, oh, I had a great time playing these games. I'll check this out. And then they turn into Michael and stack the shrink wrap one on top of the other 6 other shrink wrap games.
Especially that one, it's going to be 3 extremely long PS2 era games that they're just going to be like, oh, let me just dabble in this one. Let me just dabble in this one. Then they just don't finish all 3, which will be me.
But I guess at the same time, if it's only going to be digital only, then that kind of nixes that entire idea for the most part. But I mean, like I talked about with Skyward Sword, like nostalgia got to me. I was like, I want to play it. Like, it was 10 years old, but I want to play it, and I'm sucked into it halfway because I didn't have internet and I can play my Switch.
So. All right, the next news story. This was just starting to develop today or yesterday. So People Can Fly, the developers behind Outriders, they haven't received royalties, according to like a blog post that was translated from Polish. They were supposed to start receiving royalties once development, promotion, and distribution costs were covered from sales of the game, but they have yet to receive such money or income. And the crazy thing is they don't have sales data. They're pretty much in the dark on how successful the game has been. All they have to go off of is from something Square Enix reported in a financial call 2 months ago, where they said Outriders was a success in large part due to Game Pass bringing in or helping them reach 3.5 million players. Mm-hmm. And that's now what People Can Fly are kind of going off of just like, hey, we're being kept in the dark about how much this game sold. That's very important to us getting bonuses. And then Square just being like, it was successful at the time. It sounds like we might be getting a little bit of a battle between People Can Fly and Square in terms of like, what does success mean? And what needs to happen for them to start getting paid. And it sounds like this is going to be one of those things that people are going to look to for Game Pass. But it's just Square being Square.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that that's clear right now. This is Square being Square. And like the Square did this years ago to Tomb Raider, the remaster that came out exclusively on Xbox first and then PlayStation and PS4 at the time. It was like a year exclusivity, and they came out and said it just didn't meet the expectations of what we expect from our AAA titles. Like when you signed an exclusive contract on a lesser platform for a year. But then now it also seems like that they're hiding revenue and they're hiding sales figures from the developer, which is shady as hell. And like, so I just want to make sure, like, this is not a Game Pass problem. Like, Game Pass didn't hurt this. Square got a significant chunk of money to put the game on Game Pass. We know that. The alleged number is
3.5 million people in total.
Well, I'm just talking about how much money Game Pass paid to Square to get it on Game Pass, but the rumored number is erroneously high, I think. But it's like somewhere, like I've heard like 40 to 50 million, and I think that's ridiculous. But
yeah, no, I think it's probably closer to like 1 to 10 million.
Yeah. But again, either way, like this is, like, and I guess contracts get weird of like the wording is Game Pass numbers is Game Pass money considered sales? Does that go into the sales bucket or the revenue bucket?
That is what People Can Fly want to know.
Right.
It's like it was successful for them 2 months ago, but it is not successful as of now when they should be getting their royalties.
Correct. And then regardless of regardless of Game Pass, it charted on Steam for the first 6 weeks it was out. Like it charted in the top 3 on Steam for quite a long time. So you couldn't Game Pass it through Steam. And albeit April when it came out was a very down month for games. So it's like, whatever's even halfway decent rises to the top. But it just seems like this seems really, really weird. And this is one of those things where Square Enix does not own People Can Fly, correct?
No, it was just a publishing deal.
It was a publishing arm deal. So
yeah, they backed it financially.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if People Can Fly tries not to sign a deal with Square again.
Square has a bad track record with Western developers. Their expectations are always way too high. We know they're taking a bath because of Avengers, but they have to keep pushing Avengers content, which I'm sure they don't want to do anymore. Black Panther came out this week. That was not cheap for them to do, and they still have to produce the Spider-Man content. Well,
and the irony of that is that this seems to be like solid content for the Avenger player base. The stuff I'm seeing and hearing on social media with this stuff, it's either out or it's coming out or the hype around it, and people are like, hey, this is actually like this is fun. This is like, like a year later, like every game that gets that like second year patch as a games as a service of like, hey, this is what we learned and this is what we're changing. It sounds like this might be something really good for Avengers, but it also might be just too little too late.
It's going to bring people that already bought it back, but is it going to bring new players in is the problem that they're having with Avengers. But they signed a contract with Marvel to where they can't just pull the plug. Any other game like Avengers would have just canceled the content. We see it all the time. I mean, Anthem canceled all their plans, but they're stuck with the contract with Marvel, so they're just like, okay, we just have to keep producing this content. But Square just has this bad track record with this stuff. And the thing with Game Pass is the Game Pass probably did hurt them in terms of having a tail for the game's sales. You know, like they got that initial chunk of money, but who knows what they expected to get sales-wise throughout the months. And then it was just like, okay, we paid a chunk of money to get it on Game Pass, but as far as I know, I don't think Game Pass kind of has a structure necessarily like Plus does, where Plus, at least back in the day, Plus had the thing of like, they get paid based on how many people actually downloaded it, as opposed to what I understand with Game Pass is this, here's a lump sum of money to put it on a service for a specific amount of time.
Right.
And Outriders didn't help itself because there was a good month where it's like, hey, your save might be eaten. We don't really have a roadmap. So something you said before recording, there's like a 6-week window where a new game is actually played by people. And then if it doesn't have a roadmap or long tail, people just forget about it.
Well, so that's exactly what happened with me with Outriders, is that anytime that I thought about playing it, I'd see something on social media about the possibility of this happening or this needing to be patched or it didn't feel rewarding. And I'm like, okay, like this is the double-edged sword. So it's double-edged sword for Game Pass, at least for me. I was like, all right, it's there. I know it's not going anywhere. Like as of right now, you usually get a 2-week to a month window of when it's leaving. There was a couple people that I knew that were playing it, but a lot of people that were playing it were playing it on other platforms. Cross play wasn't working as well as it should have been at launch either, along with the other stuff that it had going on. I know that it's a good game, and that's fine, and I do want to play it. But it was one of those things where it's also a one and done game. Like you kind of go through and play it, whether you play it by yourself, you play it with some buds, and you know, or your friends. It's a one and done, and you're over with. So in terms of there's nothing. If somebody played it on Game Pass or bought it, to play it on PlayStation or PC, they play the 30 or 40 hour base campaign and they move on. So it may or may not have gotten people's attention to subscribe to Game Pass. I'd be really curious if it increased their subscription number, even a small bit. But it's just super interesting. And then it's what's really and I hope that we find out. But what's going to be really bad is because we talked about this when it was announced that it was coming to Game Pass. Like it was only announced it was coming to Game Pass like a month or 6 weeks before it was coming out. And there was already some pre-orders. I knew some people personally that had to cancel some of their pre-orders because they're like, why am I going to pay $60 or $70 for it if I can play it on Game Pass? And I hope that Square Enix isn't going, well, that doesn't count as sales revenue. That's a publisher deal. That's a deal that we signed with Microsoft to, and we got the money for that, but that doesn't help your game sale revenue. So that doesn't count as, that's really bad if that's the case. Like that's really bad from Square.
Yeah. I'm hoping this gets resolved by the time even this episode goes live for the podcast feeds, towards Square's like, oh, hey, we cut them a check sort of thing. Because this is bad on Square that this stuff came out. And you know how the internet goes. People immediately make their opinions on how this went down, and then they might not want to work with Square again.
Right.
Just based off this coming out and there being any sort of confusion on a developer not getting paid.
This is the same question we had about MLB The Show. Because MLB, Major League Baseball, is the one that signed the deal to put it on Game Pass, not Sony Santa Monica, because MLB is the publisher for it on other platforms other than Sony's platforms. So this is super. Like everything we heard was this was an MLB decision. This wasn't a Sony decision. So I would be led to believe this was 100% a Square decision, not a People Can Fly decision. So now does then the same question arises: does Sony get some of the cut of, or does Sony get some of the cut of that MLB publishing deal with Game Pass, or do they just benefit from the microtransactions?
And the answer is probably a little bit of both, but not quite 100%. Like you could say the other way around. With
as quiet as developers have been about. So we hear from publishers about Game Pass because they're pocketing the money, but developers that use publishers. That's why we're seeing a lot of these indie games, and Microsoft is probably going right to the indie developer directly.
And the indie people are getting a lot of are talking about how successful financially Game Pass has been for them in terms of money up front, and then also just sales because people are talking about their game.
But I mean,
but
anybody's
they're working
looking
directly.
at anybody's looking to knock Game Pass right now. So like, I would not be surprised to see a bunch of anti-Game Pass stuff. Like look at what it's doing, and I'm like, okay, well, you really need to understand like what's going on here. If a publisher is screwing the developer, not the platform, not Game Pass. So
It's It's either that or someone at People Can Fly's lawyers like did not do a good enough job reading this contract. But this is probably scary for the future of Outriders, because Outriders was like had enough good word coming from it that it's like, oh, they could probably do an Outriders 2 if they wanted, but
absolutely.
not in this scenario anymore.
Well, but I would Square owns Outriders IP, I would assume. And they,
like
they had People Can Fly. They signed a deal with People Can Fly to make the game. If any of this, even half of this is true of what Square is possibly doing to People Can Fly, and then Square comes to People Can Fly and goes, hey, like we want to, we want you guys to make a sequel, I'd be like, oh, what?
And the reverse of this is Square being like, oh my God, this isn't exactly what's happening. Why did you go public with this sort of scenario? Where it could just be like some weird miscommunication that immediately got blown up because the story got out. So it could work both ways, to where People Can Fly could be like, oh, we're so sorry. We did not understand what was happening. And then Square being like, cool, we're going to bury this IP now.
Well, I also wonder if, again, speculation, but depending on how long this game is on Game Pass, maybe the money doesn't come until it's over.
Could be something like that, and
or it comes in chunks, like it comes quarterly, based on this, like to your point, like the success of it on the Game Pass platform, of like, okay, here's this much money now, and then we'll see, and then you get, like, I don't know, I'm just throwing things out here, you get $5 every time somebody downloads it or something, via Game Pass. Like, that's totally arbitrary numbers though, but
yeah. But again, the Game Pass is such a new thing that, like, we're going to run into scenarios like this where they have to now structure deals. Like, if you're a developer signing with a publisher, you probably have to structure your deal like, hey, if you sell this to Game Pass or PlayStation Now or Stadia, you need to give us that info so we could know how we're doing. Because all this is so new that all these contracts that were signed 3-4 years ago when development started did not think of Stadia, did not think of Game Pass, did not think of PS Now. And now they have to account for this. It's the same thing the movie industry was going through with Netflix and is going through now with the streaming war, which is why Scarlett Johansson is suing Disney right now. Is because her contract said her movie would have been released in theaters, and she gets back-end money from the box office. And then the COVID happened, and Disney was like, we now have a streaming service, so we're going to just put it there. And that messed with her money, and that's why she's suing Disney right now. So we're seeing this in the movie industry, and we're seeing this in the game industry, how like these services are going to affect business, and publishers and developers need to account for it.
The music industry went through it 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So
it's still going through it to this day, really, with like all the Spotify stuff here.
Spotify, yeah. So it'll be super interesting to see how it all plays out. So
yeah. That's it for news. There's a lot of little stuff, but nothing major to talk about. Xbox is getting HD or 4K screens, or menus, which cracked me up that people actually gave a shit.
Yeah. About
the dashboard not being in 4K. I didn't notice, but I play on a monitor, so it's always 1080p for me. But that's it. You want to take us to the next segment?
Yeah, so sadly we get something else in here in our What's Delayed segment. So Life is Strange Remastered delayed until early 2022. Delayed from September 10th. Again, less than 30-day window. I hate it.
I know, it's so shit. Yeah.
And then this is a long-term delay, so this isn't like early 2022, like this isn't a publishing issue, or this isn't a manufacturing issue. This is like, hey, something's not right with the game. And then True Colors is still on target. So I know this is your franchise, your kind of thing, so go ahead.
True Colors was supposed to release the same day as Life is Strange Remastered, September 10th, which I always thought was a bad idea, because people really have a love, me included, for the original Life is Strange games. So releasing the new one the same day you're doing a remastered is kind of cannibalizing your own market. But True Colors is apparently still coming on September 10th, except the Switch version has been delayed to sometime this year. They weren't able to give an exact date for True Colors on the Switch. But yeah, they should have. This definitely, especially because it's a big delay. You know, it's just early 2022, so we're talking about like potentially like 6 months. They knew this was coming, and they just didn't want to say, and that sucks because this was also a pre-order bonus, I believe, for the collector's edition. So,
but that's the thing too, is like I feel like my perspective somehow, and I'm not developing the game obviously, but these two games should have been flipped. The remaster should have, the remaster should be out, and then True Colors should come out afterwards. Because like I haven't played them, and I've heard great things about them. I think I even have some on Plus and other avenues. But I'm like, why am I going to play them if there's a remaster coming up? If I'm even thinking about playing it, I want to play the best version possible. And now, like, I'm not going to play True Colors before I play the remasters. Me.
Yeah,
you know,
especially like they all are separate games, but you don't know if there's going to be some little bit of hint at the previous one, so you'll better enjoy playing the remasters first before playing True Colors, just so you can get used to that like world if you haven't played before. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is also published by Square Enix. Square Enix is having a week with this stuff, but yeah, I always thought it was a bad idea to release them on the same day. I know it's the collector's edition for True Colors or whatever they're calling it that comes with Life is Strange Remastered. So I'm assuming those discs are being printed already if there's a physical release. So I don't know. It was probably always going to be like a sheet of paper in the True Colors box saying download the remastered. But still, like if you pre-ordered this collector's edition, a special edition, and then you find out half of it isn't coming till next year, you're gonna be pissed. You're gonna be a little bummed out. And you better hope those remasters are working pretty well, because you're gonna be even more disappointed if they turn out not to be a good thing.
Yeah, I just feel like the remasters were kind of like a great throw-in. Like here's a new entry in the franchise, and here's the older ones upscaled for you to play. And now. It's just weird. So.
Yeah.
All right. What we're playing and watching. You want to go first?
Yeah, I have a hell of a list this week. Despite work being hell, I did have the last 4 days off. So I played quite a few games. The first one is Boyfriend Dungeon. Boyfriend Dungeon was actually announced in a Nintendo Indie World on Thursday and released the same day. So I bought it on the Switch, and then later that day, because I was at work all day, I found out it was on Game Pass, so I was disappointed because I already had bought it on the Switch just to find out it's on Game Pass. So that's on me for not paying attention to social media enough while at work. But I did buy it on the Switch. It runs well on the Switch. So Boyfriend Dungeon is a game. It's a dungeon crawler dating sim. So in this world, you have your wielders and weapons, and the weapons are humans that can turn into weapons. So you level up your weapon by going through dating sim mechanics, so building a relationship with these swords who all turn into sexy people, and then you're just trying to get your character to get courage and get into the dating game and also slay monsters. It's got a very cutesy top-down design when you're actually in the world. You have your overmap going to the dungeons and different parts of the town. It takes place in a modern city, modern times. So you're texting with these sexy weapons, and you're texting with people, getting the story out that way. The actual fighting mechanics, it's a dungeon crawler, so you just have a light, heavy attack and a roll. Each weapon or person, I don't know exactly how you want to call them, they have their own abilities that they give you, so you pick one you like based on... you pick one based on their personality, because that's what you would want to do in this game, as opposed to the weapon's actual ability. But right now, I'm kind of going off the weapon's ability, which means I have to tolerate some annoying characters, potentially. Which isn't, the best idea to do, but overall, after, maybe 3 hours into the game, I'm enjoying the light dungeon crawling mechanics. It's nothing too challenging, but I'm mostly into the music. The dialogue's really funny. One thing that does kind of bother me about it, though, is all the characters are coming at your character, flirting with your character, which is fine. It's a dating sim, but none of them really can be ignored for the most part. You you can tell some characters like no, or you can be kind of a dick to some characters, so they like hopefully leave you alone. But that doesn't work, so they continue to like hit on you and bother you, which is a little frustrating because I find like the two people that I want to focus my character on, and then I have to deal with like the dialogue from the people I don't give a shit about as they continue to text my character, and I have to interact with them and go along on dates with them, and it's just like, just leave me alone.
Can't you just ghost them or ignore them?
You can, but you kind of get locked into sometimes of just like, okay, I want to progress the story, and I can't find a way to progress the story unless I click and interact with those characters. I'm hoping that changes later on as, you get more comfortable with other characters, and I think the reason they're forcing me to do that early on is because they want me to interact with all the characters in their story before I decide which ones I want my character to
date. Are you sure you really don't like this person? You should really get to know this person first before you decide that.
No, and it's exactly what it feels like, but it's just like I already made my decision for the most part, so it's just kind of working against the system.
Michael's already made his judgment just based on surfaces, okay?
Hey, you know what? When you get like some weird douchebag looking guy, I just know my character isn't going to be into that person, okay? Dude's wearing no shirt and a leather jacket. Not into that. The potential like investor guy with like a deep voice. Yeah, I'm kind of into that. So I want to talk to him, or I want to talk to like the gruff street girl. So I want to talk to those two.
Michael's character has standards.
Yeah. Look, and then you get like the douchey, like stuck up guy who I already know is like going to be like a villain based off like the brief interactions I've had with him already. I'm just like, oh, I already know you're going to be a villain, so what if I just ignore you and just enjoy time with Valerie and Azaic? Like, those are the two people I want to spend time with. I don't care about you, Sunder. I don't care about you, Eric. Everyone has cool ass names but Eric. Like, who the fuck wants to date a guy named Eric? That's my brother's name. Like, ew. I'm not going to do that. So that's Boyfriend Dungeon. Then I'm playing. I just like casually just go through this, and then we have Back for Blood, which is doing its open beta this weekend. So played that. I ended up having like I was able to hop on with my friends, which is the problem I had the previous week. I was able to hop on this weekend, and I played with them from like 11 to 4:30 in the morning, which was just.
Yeah, I think I saw you tweet something when I was at work, and I'm like, what is he doing?
Well, I already knew I was going to love this game based off my previous interactions, but I wanted to get a really long session in this game, and was able to have fun just, because I was playing with my friends and all that. But I actually got into the card system when you're sitting down and doing a long stretch, because for this game, you're building a deck that gives you different abilities, so it's like extra life, 5% health, all that stuff. But as you play the story that's available to you in the beta, your deck is constantly having cards added to it, and then there's also cards that affect the world. Of like, oh, the world's going to have more fog, or there's going to be more of this creature in it. And those cards keep stacking after you finish chapters. So after a 4-hour session of not dying and continuing through the story, the game got difficult in different ways, and it's all completely random based on those cards. So I really like that aspect of just like when you get into a session, the game is going to progressively get a little bit more challenging and throw curveballs at you based on these cards. And the beta had limited cards available, so I can just imagine what's going to happen when the game's actually out and they actually have more cards to work with. So that aspect is starting to change my mind completely, because I was like the thing I was worried about with this game is like, I don't know if you remember, but at one point I was like, I hope you could turn the cards off and just play this game. And now playing the game properly, it's like, oh, okay, I can see.
Yeah. I guess the biggest thing is as long as the game continues to give you cards, enough cards, and not make you feel like that you need to go buy packs. Like that's the balance they're going to have to hit. Like, to where it's like, I have enough, but there's a chance that I could get some cool ones if I spend like $3. Like, but I have enough that I don't have to do it, but I kind of want to do it. Like, that's where I think that a balance with a microtransaction can be good, of like, versus like, okay, like, well, if you want to have a chance to beat this, I don't even know, like this tier 7 activity, you need to go get these cards, and they're paid cards only. Like, that's going to suck.
Yeah, I'm hoping they don't actually sell like the cards, or at least like the mutation cards or whatever they call them that make the game harder. Like, I'm fine if they sell basic cards, but I hope they stick with, like, cosmetics, which I should have done research on, like, what they're actually planning to do with them, because there are going to be microtransactions in this game.
Also, possibly discarding cards and getting in-game currency to then use the in-game currency to buy other cards. I hope some system like that.
I do like, though, it seems like... they do throw a lot of, like, money in the game where, like, you just find piles of it so you can, like, buy upgrades in between rounds for your weapons.
Yeah.
But I noticed there's, like, a little bit of strategy that, like, the Left 4 Dead games didn't have, to where me and my friends, when we're at the chest, or, like, the little store thing in between rounds, and we're just like, okay, what's your loadout so I can get stuff to complement that loadout? Oh, there's a benefit I could give all of us, but I need 800 gold. Okay, everyone throw their money on the ground so I can pick up the 800 gold so I can get this thing to benefit the whole team. I really like that aspect of
you guys chip 200 in now, we complete this activity, we're going to get 5,000 gold and we can distribute it amongst,
Yeah, there's mutations like that or whatever they call them, to where it's like, oh, we can earn 10% more money if we buy this card. Let's put our money into it because we're getting closer to harder content, so we're going to need this currency to buy more upgrades later.
Right.
So I really got into the card system, surprisingly, after being, like, hesitant about it. But again, beta, very limited cards available, so we'll see what it turns out to be when the final game comes out. Because we've seen games get wrecked by like systems like this before. So that was that. I'm back into Final Fantasy XIV.
Our Discord channel for like a day and a half turned into like a whole conversation about it.
Yeah, so Sarah was looking to leave her current free company data center, and I was telling her that all my friends from high school that we have a Discord server with, all 7 of them, have recently got back into Final Fantasy XIV. So she was like, well, I'll join them, but can you also join? Just because she doesn't know everyone in that server. So I was like, okay, yeah. So I basically paid the $18 to change data centers so I can move to another data center. Even though I could have waited technically till November, but like she wants to play now, I want to play now. Because my group of 7 or 8 people, 4 or 5 of them have completed the game and they just do like their dailies, their daily, weekly grind. But we also have like 3 or 4 new people that are just starting. So me, who's only had a tank up to level 23, it's like, oh, I guess it would be fun to go through that content with the people starting out that are new, since they're not that far off from my area. Because Sarah's already finished the game. She finished Shadowbringers, all the expansion. So there's not much me and her can do together because I'm so low level. So while she's playing with my friends that have beaten the game and are at her level, I now have like 3 people that are starting new characters. So I'm just waiting for them to like level up their characters so we can take on some of the early dungeons. Because while there are benefits for someone like Sarah to do dungeons that are the older dungeons, her character's so leveled up she'll be one-shotting most of the enemies, which just wouldn't be good, for anyone that would be playing with like that high level character. So did that. So I paid the $18 to change the data center. Really easy. It was a little worrisome because sometimes server capacity could be weird. So there is a chance that I would have had to wake up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and change data centers at that time. But luckily I was able to do it on a Sunday afternoon. So starting that, I'm actually playing it on PC.
Nice.
So I ended up buying the complete edition from Square Enix's website, which was like $23, but it's all 4 expansions, the base game. So bought that, set it up on PC. Wasn't too bad. The load time, since I have an SSD, are close to what I was getting on the PS5. So that's all good. The only problem is now I just have to kind of grind and then also wait for my friends to catch up, because I'm just high enough of a level from them that we can't really do any of the dungeons together yet. So just kind of playing a waiting game. I'm too low level to play with Sarah and some of my friends, but then my other friends who just started, I'm too high a level to play with them. So I'm stuck like in between. And then finally, I downloaded fucking Abandoned, the real-time experience, and that was a waste of time. I am getting more and more into the camp that, like, these are just people that are way in over their heads and don't know what they're doing. Because, oh my god. I don't know did you pay attention to any of the abandoned shit last week?
A little bit. I kept seeing is that we're trying to deploy a patch. It's coming. It's delayed. It's coming. There's a cool trailer coming, but it's delayed.
Yeah. So the real-time thing came out Tuesday. They delayed it to, like, Friday. After everyone had downloaded, they're like, oh, we have to patch it. They patched it, and then all it loads is, like, a 4-second video of, like, a shadow walking across a room. They then did an interview saying, like, well, we had to patch it, and the only way to patch it was to cut everything down to 4 seconds, which is just like, what the fuck are you doing at this point? And then they're basically claiming that they're not scammers, which I don't believe they're scammers because I don't see the hustle in this. I just think they're people that are just way in over their head. And now I really want PlayStation to come out. Like, Kojima's already said he's not anything to do with it. Konami's come out and said they have nothing to do with it. I need PlayStation to come out and just say something about, like, hey, we gave these guys a platform. They're using our logo as their logo, but we have nothing to do with this. We just wanted to give, like, they had a pitch, and we thought the pitch was good, so we gave them a spotlight. We're letting them publish something on our store, but we have nothing to do with this because people are still holding out hope that this is something. But if it was, it wouldn't be this sloppy. Like, holy shit. Like, this whole thing is such a waste of time.
If Sony was truly involved in this, Sony would have stepped in and said, hey, you know what? Stop talking. Shut up until you're ready to release it at its highest potential capacity. Like, just, you are not allowed to talk. Like,
and instead, because they're independent, Sony's like, just let them suffer. But it's like Sony at a certain point needs to just step in and like, hey, you've never let anyone do this real-time trailer bullshit. You're letting them do it. You gave them a platform on the PlayStation blog, which is... The PlayStation blog didn't used to mean too much 5-10 years ago, but now it's where Sony makes all their major announcements. So now there's prestige and importance on the PlayStation blog. So that because they gave Abandon a platform, they gave Abandon a platform. and now we're in this scenario where these poor developers, like... are shooting themselves in the foot left and right, and they have no other recourse but to keep digging themselves a hole and hope it works out for them. Because if they just quit and are like, sorry, we fucked up, they're never going to be trusted again. So they just have to keep doing this shit until something comes out, and it's just a bad look on obviously the developers, but also like Sony for giving them the platform to fuck themselves over. But even then, like, as I say that, it's not PlayStation's responsibility at the same time either. Of this, like, they paid to have that shit on their store because you can't just put stuff on a store for free.
Right.
So I don't know. It's weird. But that's it for me for playing. I watched the Field of Dreams game. That was like the highlight of stuff I watched.
They did a pretty good job with that. I didn't watch the game, but I saw the opening thing, which I thought was great, and then obviously the game ending with the walk-off was super cool, and then for you being the White Sox was probably a cool experience. Yeah,
I loved the setup for that. It was funny though, like I had a pitch to Sarah like, hey, I'm gonna watch a baseball game tonight, and she's like, oh, okay. I'm like, it's a really special game. She's like, what's special? I'm like, they're playing in a cornfield in Iowa. And then she was just like, okay. I'm like, yeah, but they're playing in the cornfield in Iowa. Then I'd explain what Field of Dreams is.
I was saying, has she seen Field of Dreams?
No. And Field of Dreams, it's an okay movie, but like, at one point, like, she's watching it with me, and she's like, oh, it's kind of a cool setup and everything like that. But they kept showing the clip from the movie where I think it's Shoeless Joe Jackson's character, like, turns around, and he's just like, is this heaven? And then Kevin Costner is like, no, it's Iowa. And then the guy just is like, oh. And then he like turns around, and that kept cracking me and Sarah up every time. Because it's a moment that kind of only works in the movie, but then when you put it out of context, it's the stupidest shit in the world. Which just, every time they showed that clip during the game, it just cracked me up and Sarah. And now we're just saying that to each other now.
Yeah. I'm just more curious, like, what Major League Baseball is going to do with this field
They already announced the next game for next year, which is...
I know, but I don't feel like you can use, like, that's a lot of money for one game a year. Like...
most farmers are subsidized by the government anyway, so I don't
No,
even
no,
think
I just meant from Major League, like, you know, like, I'm assuming Major League Baseball owns the land.
Yeah, I would imagine. The only thing that is kind of dumb, though, is, like, the movie, it's the White Sox. The movie's basically about the White Sox, and next year they're going to do the Cubs and the Reds, and it's just, what's the point at that point? Then you're just playing in a cornfield. It's not the Field of Dreams. It's just you're just playing in a cornfield.
Right.
So I think they'll do it next year, and then it's probably going to stop after that because I feel like it's not going to matter.
Or they need to do like a series there. Like
I thought it was going to be a series.
Yeah, but it was just one game. So.
I was really hoping, this sounds weird, because of COVID last year, because it was supposed to originally take place last year.
Right.
I was really hoping, because the playoffs were all fucked up and they were doing that stupid, like, oh, we're playing in, like, 3 different states.
We're going to bubble in Iowa.
Like... It would have worked. Like, if they were like, hey, the World Series is taking place in the Field of Dreams because this is the only year we can do it. That would have been fantastic. Like, that would have been interesting. And it's Iowa, so the players wouldn't have gotten into trouble because it's Iowa and there's nothing to do.
But I think if you do, I mean, obviously, like any team that hosts the All-Star game would probably be like, hey, no way. But if you put the All-Star game in Kansas City, St. Louis, or Chicago, I maybe even Minnesota's probably too far, but any of those 3 cities, and like put the home run derby at the Field of Dreams thing, that'd be cool. But you know, like I think that's a huge ticket sale thing for any. It's almost like 3 games. Yeah.
Did you hear how expensive the tickets were for that game?
No, I don't even know. How many did it hold? Because it only had it only had like down the baselines, right? It only had like there was no fans in the outfield.
I think I heard like 8,000, but that sounded too high.
Yeah.
But apparently there was 3,500 a ticket, which I didn't think people in Iowa, like in the middle of nowhere, would have 3,500.
But that's the whole thing that I'm wondering. Is like, okay, like that thing wasn't cheap to make. It wasn't expensive to make. It's not a high-end ballpark or anything like that, but it wasn't cheap. And then I'd be curious, like, profitability-wise, did they make their money back already? Maybe. You know.
Well, but just off the advertise, it was the highest-rated regular season game since, like, 2005. So they must have made their money with advertisement and then overcharging the people of Iowa $3,500, which was probably just all out-of-town people anyway.
I don't know if MLB is overcharging them versus... people scalping them, buying the tickets and scalping them, and then putting them on the market. But I haven't looked into it enough to see or to know. So
yeah, that's it for me. What did you end up playing?
So like I mentioned, I didn't have internet Wednesday through Saturday. So it was I'm like 20 hours or 22 hours into Zelda Skyward Sword. I've determined that this is probably story wise like my favorite Zelda. In terms of it's like I said, it's an origin story for the entire Zelda franchise. So there's been points that I know are coming. There's an order of things that I remembered in my mind that aren't happening in that same order. So I'm getting a little, kind of surprised by certain things. But it's at the same time where it's my favorite lore-based, story-based one. These fighting mechanics suck. I'm getting a little bit better at it now that I've just like as I've been continuously going through and trying to be a little bit, I guess, more patient, but just like switching gadgets live in the game, and like constantly trying to use the right stick to pull the camera out, and it pulls the sword out, because the right stick is really only used for the sword unless you're holding down a different button. It's also one of these things where I feel like I don't know how to articulate this correctly, but every time I save it, I see the counter, and like I said, I know I'm like 20 some odd hours in, and obviously I was playing a little bit more because I couldn't play online stuff, but it doesn't feel like I've been playing for 20 hours. Like for whatever reason, the Zelda franchise hits with me where I'm in dungeons and almost kind of doing a Metroidvania style thing where I'm kind of doubling back to something to the same area I was to then find another hidden area within. That's another dungeon. So, and I'm like, and that's not annoying me, like in terms of, because the story elements are so good, it's not annoying me. I have to cough.
Dave's still. I think it's the basement, Dave.
I'm starting to think so too. Yeah. So, because I've been fine since I came down here, and this is like the first time I've been down here since we recorded last week. So, so I'm really enjoying that part of it and the story part. I really want Owen to have the same experience I'm having, but at the same time, I have to realize he's 6, and my wife said it best. She came in and she sat down for a little bit, or she was walking by and she was seeing some story thing play out in the game, and she's like, these games really need voice acting. Like, it's because it's a lot of reading. Like, and I've been trying to read out loud to Owen when he's there, and I think sometimes he just gets gets annoyed because when I'm reading, like, I'm not doing like different voices or different cadences or anything like that, or I'm not reading or doing any kind of emotion. I'm just reading. So and I know I'm sure it's expensive, and I'm sure people would hate it. But even at this point, like, Link, you already don't ever read, or it's implied that Link doesn't talk. So at this point, people are always like, well, what is Zelda supposed to sound like? Well, in theory, she could sound like a different person every single time because it's a different incarnation of Zelda. It's not the same. It's not the same Zelda in every game, and it's not the same, characters in every game. So, like, I don't understand that. Even if somebody would just read the text that's on the screen, like, even if there was a narrator, I think it would help, or the option to have a narrator on, like the TikTok voice. I'm kidding. But a text to speech thing, I think sometimes would be even better than just nothing at this point. But
I wonder what the accessibility on the Switch probably doesn't feature that.
Right.
No.
So, and then watching, again, no internet for a while, which meant essentially no TV watching unless we were putzing on our phones. Thankfully, our phones have unlimited data. I did start, as the Wi-Fi issue extended over time, I did start looking into the possibility of, like, USB-C to HDMI cables, screen mirroring, like on the Roku, and we figured out that there's a couple things we can do, but my wife was a little worried about the quality. And then as soon as it became abundant that we maybe need to do something, like, the Wi-Fi started working again. So it does kind of suck, though, because, to be fair, since I didn't have Wi-Fi, I wouldn't have had cable either, because they're the same ecosystem, so I wouldn't have been able to watch anything anyways. But it's just, it's just one of those things where you realize, like, she's like, we can't even watch movies because it's all downloaded and everything. And then I don't have a lot of DVD players anymore.
Yeah.
Although I did tell her I could hook up the PS4 if she wanted it to watch something bad enough. On a disc.
Because you're digital. So
yeah,
that makes sense.
Yep. So, I mean, we ended up watching Ted Lasso, and then Saturday was Owen's birthday, and we took Owen to his first Tiger game. It was a Saturday night game, which is kind of rare. It was like a 6:00 game. Miguel Cabrera is chasing 500 home runs, and it was really cool to see the ballpark full. I went in May for my birthday, and it was very, very empty, very dense. And then this one was full. I wouldn't say. I guess I wouldn't call it crowded, but it was busy enough. And it was cool just to kind of to be there again for Comerica Park, where the Tigers play, to be near capacity and a lot of cheering and people. I guess what I call, like, fair weather baseball fans, of, like, everybody, when Miguel Cabrera would get up, come to bat, they would all stand up and start. And I was fortunate enough that I was in a seat where I didn't have to stand up, and I was videoing it just in case, just kind of on my phone, just videoing it, because it would have been cool to see history like that. But he had a fly ball. And, like, 80% of the ballpark was like, and I'm like, yeah, that's not going anywhere.
Don't you love that? Like, when a player's chasing that, every time they hit the ball, everyone freaks out, and it's just like, you guys watch baseball, right? You know where the ball is going.
Or they were booing him because he got walked with, like, a runner on first, and I'm like, that guy's not giving up that home run. Like, he's not going to be that guy.
No pitcher wants to give up that home run, and if you can walk Miguel Cabrera, you still walk Miguel Cabrera.
Regardless, he's still considered arguably a top 5 hitter of all time. So, like, he's getting pitched around already. And then, like, there was a point where he let off an inning. I was like, okay, well, this is where I think he, A, will see something to hit, and B, where he might actually try, like, he might actually, like, all right, I'm going to try to hit a home run. Because he he's on the downward spiral of his downward descent of his career, but he still is a very, very good hitter, and but he's also on a team that's developing into a relatively good team, much faster than they're supposed to be. The team's flirting with 500. This was a team that 2 years ago lost like 100 games, and they're progressing in a direction that's very interesting. And I think he still wants to be a part of that. Like, this team next year could battle for a playoff spot if the players continue to rise. And I would not have thought that at the beginning of this year at all. Mm-hmm. So they're definitely in this development thing where he's chasing 500 home runs and 3,000 hits, and he's already a lock for the Hall of Fame because he's like the first guy to win the Triple Crown in like 50 years. And if he gets the 500 home runs, obviously, and the what do you call it, the 3,000 hits, like, he's a guaranteed lock, probably unanimous if he can do all that. So, but it was cool to be there to see that. Everybody's like, oh, you might catch that. I'm like, no, we're sitting behind the plate, so it's not going to happen. But it was definitely fun. So that's pretty much it. Like I said, we did end up watching Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso had a Christmas episode. It was, some people hated it, but I thought it was pretty funny. And mm-hmm. I love how like Apple TV kind of does the like they did it with Mythic Quest, and like they do like I guess the best way to call it is like the one-off that it kind of like branches off from the story for like a week.
Yeah.
So
it's nice.
I'm not sure if it's an Apple TV thing. It seems to be more. I've noticed it more on Apple TV shows, but other shows do it as well. It's just that the 3 or 4 series that we've been watching on Apple TV tend to do it. So this is a Christmas. I don't know if this is supposed to be a Christmas in July or Christmas in August episode or something, mm-hmm. but just where it kind of took place in the story of that. So yep, again, I'm still enjoying Ted Lasso. If you haven't seen it yet, and you have the ability to get an Apple TV, check if you've bought an Apple product in the last 12 or 18 months. You probably have a year subscription laying in your email somewhere. I definitely think it's worth checking out and watching the show. That's it for me, though. So we'll hit some questions really quick. Questions and comments using hashtag #AskTheDigitalDays. The first one comes from Ali Shan. We haven't heard from him in a little bit, so I'm glad to hear he's still around. As far as as teams DC redeem themselves with the Snyder Cut and the Suicide Squad, are there any other characters you'd like to see on these teams in the future? And what other team in the DC would you like to see in a live action?
So for me, there's a couple. So like, I would love to see, I know like a Green Lantern something's coming, but I would want to see a proper Green Lantern Corps movie or TV show where you don't even need to have like a Hal Jordan Earth Green Lantern. Just do the Green Lanterns in space doing their police force Nova team stuff. Like, I think that's the problem with superhero movies when they get too big, especially DC right now. Just trying to connect them all with the other movies can be kind of difficult. Green Lanterns is like the one opportunity they could just do their own thing and not touch any of the DC stuff until the DC stuff on Earth is like figured the fuck out in terms of like, all right, who's Batman right now? Who's Superman? You can do the Green Lanterns Corp like in space, and they can live separately until you're ready to pull them in. I think that would be really good. I know we already got a Birds of Prey movie, but I would like to see like a proper Birds of Prey, which is like Batgirl, Black Canary, and Huntress, as opposed to the Harley Quinn Birds of Prey that we got. I would rather see the original Birds of Prey. And then I really, really want like I think we'll get a Gotham City Sirens, which is like Harley Quinn, Catwoman. I think that's already announced with like Poison Ivy. But I want a Batman like family, kind of like what we're getting with Gotham Knights, or what is it called? Is it Gotham Knights?
Yeah.
Where you just get all the Robins together, because there's so many Robins and they all have stories that interconnect with each other in the comics. So I would really like to see something with all the Robins, as opposed to the current DC universe where there's only one Robin we know of and he's dead. I would like to see Nightwing and the Red Hood, all of the different variations of Robin and like Batgirl kind of doing their own thing. Though I hear Titans is a good TV show, but I have not.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it as well. So
yeah,
I would love to see like a deeper, like similar to what you want, like a deeper dive into and I guess I don't even know if this is the correct name to call him. I'm not deep into the Bruce Wayne Dick Grayson relationship. Either a TV show or a movie that's more developing of Robin becoming Robin.
Yeah, and because they just
training and learning, I know that he has a background as an acrobat, but at the same time, like an acrobat just doesn't automatically know how to like fight and so.
Yeah, and the comics definitely have explored why he's so good at being like a crime fighter. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I would like to see a Robin origin with Batman as opposed to what we get now with Titans, where he's like, "Oh, I hate Batman now because he's an abusive guardian." Yeah.
I think a television show, like a Dick Grayson television show of the time from when he is like 17, 18 years old until he's like 23, 24, of where you don't even really see like whoever they decide to cast as Bruce Wayne and Alfred, like I'm fine with, but it's more of like 90% of the show is them in street clothes, and 10% of the show is them in their superhero form. Yeah,
and then you can transition like him to Nightwing, and then introduce another Robin, and see if there's some sort of conflict when Batman replaces a Robin with another Robin. Like, there's got to be something there in terms of just like.
So I think that'd be really cool, and the same thing. Like, I think the Aquaman storyline is super interesting, and I would love to see them like how they tie it in. And I guess for me, like I've seen the little, like as I've still been watching Smallville. I've seen the little hints at the Flash and at Aquaman. Like, they don't call them that, but they're like they hover around.
They wear the colors and all that stuff. Yeah,
so it's like it's always been like super interesting, and it just got me thinking more and more.
Yeah.
So next question is from Robert Cartwright. Do you think the PS5 interface has taken a step backwards compared to the PS4? I do think it has some good features, but surely the addition of folders should be standard. I think a step backwards is hard to say. I think it's a step sideways. It's different, but I think we got so comfortable and so used to the PS4 interfaces that any kind of change feels odd. Folders, I don't care. I didn't really use them very much on the PS4. I used them on the PS4.
Lived off those.
I used them on the PS4 when I had a substantial hard drive in my PS4, and that was where they were necessary. Right now, I can probably hold 5 games if I'm lucky. So.
Yeah, that is definitely a good point. Until like you upgrade the hard drive and all that, like you don't really need folders. I use an external SSD, so I'm kind of using up a lot of space on that interface. So folders would be great for me. But yeah, I think a step back is too harsh. I will say the PS4 one had a lot of good things going for it, and they did feel like on the PS5 they used the PS4 interface as a base, and then they changed certain things just to change certain things. But we already see them going back on like the trophies, for instance, during the beta. I think they did a total step back on how they present trophies in the PS5, but they're fixing that, and we're going to get our horizontal, our vertical list or whatever. So it's going to be similar to the PS4. This stuff's always a work in progress. People like factory reset your PS3 and then look at that like interface. Even though it mostly stayed the same, all the tweaks they made to it to improve upon it. And the PS4 went through this as well. They don't know exactly what to expect until people start using it and interacting with it. It's just like, oh, okay, people are going to want to do this. But I think folders will be coming eventually. I think, to Dave's point, you don't do the folders until you let them, add storage to their device so they can actually have a reason to use the folders. Because ideally,
I think their first priority was getting these other external, like this other internal SSD to work. Like, I think that has been their first priority, and now that that's working, I think you'll start seeing a little bit more quality of life firmware updates that are coming.
And that's what I'm kind of expecting is just they needed to get, because right now, like, realistically, I think you could fit 8 games on your dashboard, and
unless you're playing a bunch of indie games.
No, exactly. Unless you're playing indie games, like, realistically, you're getting, like, what, 4 or 5 full PS5 releases on your interface? So this wasn't a priority, but as now people can upgrade, you'll hear more people want folders.
Yeah, when you
and
start
then those
seeing
will
people
come.
that choose to spend the same amount they spend on the console for a hard drive, and then they can have 2.5. I think because like you can get up to like a 2 terabyte internal right now.
No, I don't
Or-
think there's a limit right now, but
Okay,
it's
so-
really expensive. It's like $400
Yeah.
for a 2 terabyte.
Right. So as people start getting 2.5 plus terabytes of available space, I think that's when you're going to start seeing more of a clamoring for quality of life stuff within the interface.
The store is a complete backwards.
I treat both. Yeah, I treat both the Xbox store and the PlayStation store as the same. As I don't go to them on the consoles unless I have to. I just use the apps.
Like I like using the console for the stores, and the PS5 store is just atrocious. I never want to interact with it. Like I'm just like, okay, where's everything? Because it's terrible. But now I have to know exactly what I want to buy so I can just search for it. And even then, like it can get confusing. I'm like, oh, here's the PS5 one, here's the PS4 one. It's gotten better at letting you know which one is which, but there's still instances where I'm like, all right, let me click into this one and read for a couple seconds just to make sure I'm getting the right one.
All right, so the last two questions kind of go hand in hand, I feel like. So I'm gonna read them both together. Stefan Wren writes, would you ever quit your job and do podcasting full time if you could earn enough money doing it? And then Penwell writes on Twitter, sends, how do you hope Digital Days Gaming will grow in the next few years? So would I ever quit my job and podcast full time if I could earn enough money doing it? Yeah.
yeah. I hate my job currently, so yes, definitely.
So that I feel like that would be a yes, if we could do that. Right now, in terms of where Digital Days Gaming is at in terms of like Twitch support and Patreon support and just download numbers and things like that, I feel like that we're doing better than I thought we would. Talking to a couple of other people and kind of getting vague ballpark figures of how they do versus how we're doing. I'm like, okay, like we're okay. But
yeah, things can always be better is like a common thing, but that's true with anything. Even if you're like a top 10 podcast at number 9, you're gonna be like, well, we could be number 8 or 7,
right?
But definitely, like, I don't know where I would want to see this going, other than I just want to continue to still do this. And
I guess what I would envision, absolutely, like having fun, like not it feeling. I feel less stressed over the last year and a half than I have in a long time sitting in front of a microphone and playing video games. Like I feel substantially less stressed. That is a huge contribution to really doing little to no written work. And for the most part, discovering that PR is 100% okay with no written work. Like that, like from a business standpoint of like, okay, like expectations. And when I send something to a PR company and they're like, yeah, awesome, perfect. That's all I needed. Thanks. That's great. And I'm like, oh, and I'm nervous when I send it to them, and, so then that's always been, a concern. But obviously growing Digital Days Gaming means possible more opportunities to cover more things, which also means more work, air quotes, work. So like Michael and I are being very selective of how deep down the rabbit hole we go with that, because we both have lives outside of Digital Days and lives and jobs outside of Digital Days. So, and there's definitely different avenues of life, and as you guys have all heard and listened to us, especially me, like I have definite high peaks and valleys of I'm on overnights for 2 months, like that messes with a lot of stuff, and I've got 2 kids in college, and I've got a kid that's going into all day elementary school pretty soon. Like those are avenues. Michael's moving and in the process of putting down roots for possible future of the life that he may or may be having in the next 5 years, like versus like I'm pretty much established. I don't see myself doing like a major career change anytime soon, and I've got a wife and I've got kids and I own a home, So but where I would like to see the future of Digital Days going is I just want to see the community continue to grow and play games together. Like that's what I really want. And I'm loving all this cross-play stuff and these other conversations of seeing games, come up, like Final Fantasy XIV being talked about in the Discord. Like that's not my wheelhouse at all. And I love seeing the conversations happening in the Discord and or seeing some stuff going on in chat where one of the guys that asked the question, Stefan Wren, he's always been backlog guy, and he's been telling us about how he's been catching up on his backlog, but he now because he lives in the UK and there's a handful of UK listeners we have which are great and they interact in the group. They've gotten him to start playing like Rainbow Six and multiplayer games with him, and he was like 6 months ago he was kind of like anti-multiplayer. And not anti-multiplayer, he just didn't do it. And now he's been playing Rainbow Six with them on their weekly, Friday poker night that they have, like I always call about. And then they post stuff in the Facebook group, and it's amazing. Like, and I love it. Like, so he's now exposed to a whole new group of people, and they're playing games together on somebody's birthday, and like they're drinking, and they're drinking and they're shooting stuff with their friends, and like that's Digital Days Gaming Foundation. That's what I've always wanted to see. And if somehow we can make that bigger across whether you play with a keyboard and mouse, whether you play with a controller, whether you play with a toddler in your lap, whether you play with your wife yelling at you across the room because you're playing video games too late, like that's our lives. Like, so, and I want to see that bigger. So
yeah, community growth is like the thing that I care about. Just seeing people interact with. I like when I'm busy at work all day, and then at the end of the day, like I'm on the bus going home, and I just click our Facebook group, and I see there's like 10 posts from like different people, and they're having like conversations, and I see a post that doesn't involve me and Dave at all that has like 25 comments, and I just see people just interacting, having fun. That's what I want to see, continue that grow. Though obviously, as that grows, that gets a little scarier because then that's when you have to manage,
babysit.
So that stuff is definitely out there.
We've had a couple one-offs, but for the most part, like our community is solid. So
so like that's the only fear I have with like community growth, is because then that will be something that's inevitable. It's with every community, but I just want to continue to see that group grow, and then also just being able to just continue to do this and have fun. Like we're 94 episodes in, and I haven't been like, fuck, I gotta record today. It's always, even when I'm sick, I show up. Dave was coughing for like a month straight, but we still wanted to put on the show. So
and the fact of the matter is like that you guys are appreciative that we continue to do this, and it's a commitment that we've made to the community, to where like I like it bothered me that I missed a week. Like Josh did a great job. Like, but it still bothered me that I missed a week and didn't talk to you guys. And when I put something on Twitter or Facebook about it, they're like, "Hey, you're entitled to take some time off," and and then it never really felt like that before. So so it's just kind of one of those things where like there was a standard set prior, and if we tried to deviate from that standard, that was always frowned upon, and now like it's our standard. And there's if something has to alter or change, or we record like Michael and I have recorded shows at 10 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 7 o'clock in the evening, and 1 o'clock in the evening, like in the middle of the night. So like it's just like that's just, and we just make it work, and we figure it out, and you guys are there. And if you're not there on Twitch this week, that's fine. If you're there next week, that's great. If you download the show, thank you so much. If you could leave a review, that'd be great. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it, that's your prerogative. If you only listen to us because you like to hear us talk about PlayStation, awesome. If you don't like it when we don't talk about PlayStation, like, okay, sorry. If you don't like Game Pass, there's a fast forward button. I mean, like, I don't know what to tell you, but it's definitely like with cross-platform play coming, like this and all this stuff happening. Like, I look, the future looks bright, and I hope that everybody could look at every platform. And if you want to buy Back 4 Blood and play it on your PlayStation because that's all you own, cool. We got some people in the community that are going to play it on Game Pass, and you can join the Discord voice channel and shoot stuff in the face with your buddies. So. All right, social medias. So that's our show for the week. So on socials, you can contact us at Digital Days Pod. That's the main account on Twitter. Michael's is at the first MJC, and mine is at Good Dave Hunt. Just like Michael mentioned, the Facebook group there's always a couple things going on in there. You can check that out. Discord servers kind of turned into a Final Fantasy nerd fest, but that's great. If it keeps going, we'll make them their own room. But again, I love to see that. So all the links to the Facebook group, the links to the Discord channel are in the show notes. Patreon.com/digitaldaysgaming. That link is in the show notes as well. There's different tiers in there. Feel free to check them out. If that's a way you want to support us, there's a PayPal link in there. Again, you can use a Twitch subscription if you want. There's t-shirts, teesprings.com/digitaldaysgaming. There's hoodies there. Maybe get some hoodies because it is mid-August, which means it's going to be hoodie weather like in 6 weeks in some places of the country. Or you can be like Michael and wear a hoodie right now.
Yep. AC's full blast right now.
So I hope everyone has a great week and keep moving forward.
Don't be a dick. See ya.